How's everybody doing? This thing working? We better just yell at you. Well, we'll try it and see how it goes. Looks like people are still filtering in. My name is Kevin Sutherland. It's awesome to be here. It's great to see all of you. I actually just found out about 2 weeks ago that I'd be doing this presentation today, so I'm hoping we can keep the expectations good and low, especially when it comes to my slideware, which is mostly just pictures downloaded off the internet. I didn't have time to draw hand-drawn pictures like Chris Avery did. Didn't have time, didn't prioritize the time to make hand drawing. I was originally planning on presenting to you today about the concept of bringing agility to our large government organizations, but as I mentioned in the intro I gave earlier, okay, come on this way. It seemed that a lot of the content was very relevant to large bureaucratic command and control organizations that work with a deterministic mindset. Anybody feel like they are working in one of those organizations? Yeah. So hopefully the presentation is relevant to a broader audience than just government folks. I split the presentation into three main sections. The first section dives into the core important ingredients that are necessary for an organization to exhibit agility, at least from my perspective. The second part is a great lead in the responsibility process. Second part is all about the blame and justify. What are the barriers that we experience in some of these large organizations or government that prevent those organizations from exhibiting agility? And then the third part of the presentation is moving on to that responsibility step, which is what can we do about it as leaders or as team members? What are some tactical things we can explore to try to make improvements from the positions that we have in these organizations? I've been delivering large software implementation projects for government organizations for around 2 decades. The first half of that time spent delivering large waterfall-driven projects for the state of California, child support systems, welfare systems, pension systems, often $500+ million jobs, 3 to 5 year timelines, things like that. The second half of my career has been spent doing similar sized work, but attempting to bring the practices of Agile to the table for those efforts. And in both those situations, I would say that the result has been underwhelming in many ways. Often we were able to successfully deliver the work and the scope that we were expected to deliver, but the value and the benefits that the people received that were meant to benefit from the work that we were doing often was not comparable to the immense cost of doing that work. So I've really been on a quest over the last 4 to 5 years to explore this very concept and figure out there must be a better way out there to take the effective concepts that we know about and we all appreciate from the agility space and try to apply those to these organizations and institutions that we depend on as citizens who are struggling to create value for us in the world. And I've brought this question to, so I've been reading books, listening to podcasts, joining Agile forums, talking to Agile leaders, and the response I often get back that's most common is, you can't, right? You can't do it. You should move on, go do something else, find somewhere that's accepting of agility and work there. And as I get to be an older person, in addition to my back not working anymore and those sorts of things, I've started to want to do something with my career that's more meaningful, that adds value, that's helping people. And I figured what better way than to make improvements to the organizations that serve us using agility. So I'm hoping to explore that, and the subtitle of the presentation is relevant. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I can share some things that I've tried and I've experimented with that have worked well for me. But I'm hoping this is the start of a conversation and a dialogue to bring this question to the Agile community in a bigger way. How many people out there have read Think Again, Adam Grant? Anybody? Here and there? Great book. I highly recommend it. We actually just finished reading this in our Des Moines Tech Book Club. For the people that haven't read Think Again, one of the concepts that Adam presents in this work is the notion when presenting or making an argument not to come at it like a preacher or a prosecutor or a politician, but instead to adopt the mindset of a scientist with more of a hypothesis-based approach. And I recognize the risk of standing in front of a big group of people, essentially preaching and coming off as though we're preaching information to you, that I have all the information. I added this slide as a reminder to me, but also an invitation to you that what I'm putting forth is hypothesis-based and is up for challenge and debate and discussion. I do hope to have some engagement and conversation through the presentation, as well as I'm hoping to put in a topic in the open space at the end of the day to come tear this up more in a smaller group if people are up for it. All right, so diving into part one. As I said, I mostly just downloaded pictures. So one of the pictures I found was a pizza, and so I'm going with a pizza analogy an agile pizza analogy for the three core ingredients that I'm hypothesizing are important core ingredients for agility, and using the analogy of the pizza crust, the sauce and the cheese, and the toppings. So to dive into what the hell I'm talking about with this, starting with the toppings, what I'm referring to here in the Agile pizza analogy is execution. And I'm guessing this is something that's very familiar to the people at this conference. It's something that we spend a lot of our time on in the Agile community and DevOpsDays, focused on a lot of the presentations that you might see today and tomorrow will be around execution topics, things like management frameworks, your XP, your Scrum, your doing sprints, SAFe if you're into that sort of thing, technical excellence, so continuous integration, clean architecture, DevOps itself. There's a whole range of topics that technical excellence covers. Teaming concepts, you'll hear about pair programming, mob programming, team topologies, whether we're on-site or remote, what's more effective, co-location. Delivery mindset principles, continuous learning, focusing on the end user. My personal favorite, which is simplicity, the art of maximizing work that we don't have to do. And measurement of success, so lead time, cycle time, throughput, velocity if you're into that sort of thing. Ways that we understand how well we're doing with the work that we're delivering. So there's really no shortage of people out there that are willing to train or to teach or to spend time improving these concepts and making them better. That's my execution toppings layer. Moving on to the crust, what I'm referring to in my pizza analogy here is leadership. And similar to a pizza without a crust probably doesn't resemble much of something that looks like a pizza to us. In the same way, a organization with leadership that doesn't promote a strong vision that's clear, motivational, and sets priority, or a leadership that doesn't establish or foster a culture of trust, collaboration, integrity, psychological safety, an organization with leadership not doing some of these fundamental things likely does not represent something that we would look at and consider to be agility. So moving on to the third element, now we're starting to get a little bit more into the hypothesis space. What I'm proposing here is maybe that it's particularly important in these large bureaucratic organizations is that there's this secret sauce that we often don't talk about much, and I'm referring to that as work decomposition that really holds that pizza together and binds those toppings to the crust in an effective way. And there are three key elements that I'm suggesting are needed for good work decomposition to promote good agility. One, that the way we break down the work connects that vision and that leadership to the team execution. If I'm a member of a team and I'm working on a work item, I should be able to draw a direct line from that work to how that work improves the overall mission of the organization. And secondly, end-to-end value, that we break down the work in a way that's sliced end-to-end as opposed to stepwise. And like I mentioned, ties back to that vision at all breakdown steps along that work decomposition. This is a place where I often see problems that exist, where the first instinct of a lot of people is when they get a gnarly problem is to break it down into those steps. All right, step 1, step 2, step 3. Let's start with step 1, then step 2. And the suggestion here is it's really important to incorporate the concept of slicing that problem into thin end-to-end strips that go across all the steps and deliver just a little bit of that outcome or solve a little bit of that problem in order to do this well. And then third, definition of done. So something that folks are probably very familiar with in the execution space, but suggesting this is important to do all along the way that we break down work, and that it's understandable and clear at the leadership level and at the team level. That's something that I also see often is missed, is your teams are often very clear about their definition of done and spend time talking about it, but it's not something that's understood outside of the teams, which can lead to confusion. All right, so that is the Agile Pizza hypothesis so far, the key ingredients. And I can talk, I got a writing board. So far, any questions or challenges or thoughts or other things that you guys have to say that's specific to the hypothesis? Anyone? I'll keep going if we have no. Yeah.
Don't some of your execution things apply to leadership though? So like all those things you want your leaders to basically be models of those things that you talked about as the top things.
So the execution being, all the things in leadership being applicable to execution?
Yeah, so do you want your toppings in your crust or?
Do I want my toppings in my crust? Well, so is the question that we need to have all those leadership qualities in the execution, or you need to have the execution in the leadership? Or is it just a bad analogy?
No, I like the analogy.
Okay.
I love the concept. I'm just like, but you want all those things, you want your leaders to be modeling also. So like the execution.
Oh, like the mindset,
yeah,
execution stuff.
Yeah, sorry, that's it.
Yes, totally agree. Yeah, and I'll have to think about how that ties in. But yeah, the concept being a lot of that culture, I would say, also includes many of the execution mindset principles. We end up, in an Agile community, we end up talking about them in the confines of execution most of the time, and I think it's a great point to say that's not just an execution discussion, it should be expanded to the culture, the leaders, the mindset that's across the organization. So, am I catching your point?
Yeah, maybe there's seasoning in the crust.
That's what I was saying.
Perfect, seasoning, love it. Any other comments, challenges, questions? Yes. Ooh, and I did have a slide for this, but specifically the hypothesis being, one, that this work breakdown is really important, and two, that we miss it a lot of times, and that's one of the main things that I'm saying here as well. But we can dive into that more in open space, potentially. All right, so moving on to the lay, blame, and justify portion of the presentation. Anyone have, the leadership and the culture, very clear lay, blame, and justify reasons for not exhibiting agility. Anyone have other things that are just external factors or other things they see with these organizations that cause agility to be problematic or harder to achieve? You guys can think of, shout out. Yeah. Micromanagement.
Too many big things all at once.
Too many priorities.
Status quo.
Don't want to change. This is how we do things here. Anyone else? Lack of clarity.
Government.
Just government itself. That's the problem. All right.
I mean,
Being too big.
It operates very bureaucratically, like at a higher level than, especially when you're contracting with them. They don't.
Procurement.
They have no
Bureaucracy.
Yeah. Policy procedures of the government.
Rules, laws, policies. Inertia. Continuing to do things the same way.
silos and empires.
What was silos, what?
An empire building.
Empire building, politics,
It's an IT thing.
division of responsibility, or lay blame dividing across silos. Yes, all of these things. I picked out 5 reasons that I came up with for blame items that I thought would be worthwhile to talk through. I think a lot of them covered by some of the things that you guys just said. But the first one that I have in my list is outcomes conflict, and that comes to lack of clarity points. And I think this happens in all organizations, not just a government organization. And typically here, well, we want to delight our customers, and we also want to make a profit. And so there's this back and forth prioritization among those two outcomes. And I think there's a good answer for this for businesses from the Agile community, which is actually the way that you make a profit is you delight your customers. These are really the same outcome, problem solved, no outcomes conflict, you're welcome. However, in a government organization, this is not always true. So for government, you might want, on one hand, to be providing better services to our citizens, but on the other hand, do it in a way that costs less to our taxpayers, also benefiting our citizens. And this can often truly be at odds where there may be a situation where improving the services doesn't necessarily mean lower taxes. A good example of this might be an entitlement benefit, something like, let's say we have a system that administers our food stamps benefits for needy families. We might have stakeholders or constituents or people on the project who don't really think it's a good idea to give food stamps to needy families in the first place, much less make it efficient and effective and easier for them to manage. So this can truly create a conflict for teams trying to work in those environments. So like say we're putting in a new system, we might have stakeholders saying, great, we're putting in this new system, we're going to eliminate fraud, we're going to make it harder for people to get their benefits because we're going to ask them a lot of questions that make sure someone's not cheating the system. We're going to increase the reporting requirements. We're going to make this much easier to save money. And then on the other side, you might have stakeholders that are saying, great, we're going to get this new system. We're going to make it easier for people to apply. We're going to lower the bar. We're going to make it streamlined, and we're going to make it a better experience for them to manage this benefit that we're providing to them. And so sitting on a team, you could be getting a lot of conflict in this scenario if there's not something making that clearer. So tying this back to the work breakdown suggestion, that's one way that we can draw a line from the outcome that we're finding important or that we're prioritizing, make that clear to the team and how they can see it in the work that they're doing. The next one on my list is, is limited workforce. Also something that affects all organizations, but I'd like to do just a quick thought experiment, if you can bear with me on this, and everyone can close their eyes. Take a deep breath, relax. Think about the challenges that you have experienced or you've observed in hiring new staff for your organization. And think about the challenges that you've had or observed in retaining good talent on your teams and for your organization. And think about the overall pandemic and the Great Resignation and how that has had an impact on your work and your organization and your staffing and the skills that you get. And then with all that in mind, pretend that the people in your organization make 30 to 70% less and you don't have any ability to get additional money to staff or to retain staff. And you can open your eyes. The thoughts you were just having as I was talking through that are probably the way most government management people feel on a daily basis as they're trying to work through staffing issues. And that can be even more acutely problematic in the IT space. Like when we're looking at those execution toppings, skills and experience needed to do that effectively, that often takes a premium set of people to do that work in many cases. And governments are very limited in being able to retain and keep people in-house that can fully do the Agile execution space. So what that ends up doing is compounding the next issue, which I think someone mentioned as well, is procurement. The only way that these organizations have to go get those skills is to go to vendors that have those skills already through a procurement process. Has anybody been involved in a government procurement process before? You people? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about with this one. The biggest issue that I see, that I've observed, is that procurement offices are still, technology is changing at such a fast rate, and the way that it's delivered is changing at such a fast rate. Being able to stay current with that, with laws, policies, regulation, mindset, procurement practices, is just not something that most governments have been able to do. And so we're looking at 30 to 40-year-old mindset in terms of how work is purchased, which is great when you're going to go build a road, when you know most of the information that you need up front, like how much material you'll need, about how long it takes, probably some of the unknowns, like if there's weather, it might cause some cost increases or delays. But you can build all that into an upfront contract, reasonably ask multiple vendors to bid on it, and choose the one that is the lowest cost. That process does not work well when applied to systems delivery or knowledge work, where you don't really know, you'll learn everything about what you're doing as soon as you start doing the work. So, and back to the work decomposition again, the even bigger problem is that what this often results in is enshrining a work decomposition into the contract up front, making it relatively inflexible, which can create huge challenges and increases the emphasis on a need to do it well, if you're going to have to do it up front. So that's procurement being another barrier. Organizational structure, I think this was mentioned as well. I think the analogy of a pyramid resonates with many folks who are familiar with a large bureaucratic organization. And when I listen to a lot of the people that speak about how to bring agility to organizations, I often hear them talking about the way to address this is to just shift the whole thing into a product organization model. And the way I would consider that, given my Agile pizza analogy, is just make lots of little mini pizzas for each product and tie them together with a vision at the top of the org, which works great and sounds good from bringing things to agility. The problem being for these organizations that are still in this big pyramid structure, it's not something that can be done quickly, and you're still going to have to deal with that pyramid for quite some time. Budget variability, another challenge that's applicable to many companies or all companies. The most common answer that I see most organizations having for this is, we'll create an annual budget, we'll determine how much money we're paying for our project work, our operations, we'll set it all, and then we'll start working from that for the year. Problem being, things change, and that can lead to frustration, chaos, needing to adjust and shift that plan mid-year. And I think the Agile community has a very consistent answer for this one as well. Anyone have thoughts on what that is, or what I think it is anyway? On fixing budget variability? No? No? Yeah, no. Fund the teams. There you go. So, in a large bureaucratic organization, what typically I see happening is what fund the teams means is fund the toppings. And so, when you have a funded topping set, when you get changes, they're often not have the ability to, they're not fully empowered to really incorporate everything needed to deliver those changes, and can often result in inaction. So again, similar answer to the pyramid situation. Best case scenario is you fund your Agile mini pizzas. When you get changes, those are fully capable and empowered to adapt and change. All right, so we've talked about the core ingredients for agility. We've talked about the laying blame and justifying the common barriers that we have to achieving agility. Let's move on to improvement suggestions and ways that what can we do as the people in this room to make this problem better. The first item on my list as a suggestion is to focus on the fundamentals. So going back to that pizza analogy, focusing on that seasoned crust and the way that we break down work as a key focus area. And I know what you're thinking. Hey Kevin, I'm just a team member. I don't set the vision. I'm not sitting in the crust layer. I don't break down the work. I receive work items. It comes to me, and then I work on them. That's how this works. How do you expect me to focus on the crust and the sauce? And yeah, good point. I guess one answer I have is responsibility. It's one, but at a minimum, something that most people can do is at least ask some of the key questions. So for that work item that you've been given, try to figure out how does this tie to the vision of the organization? What does success look like in terms of that vision, not just in terms of that work item that I have in front of me? And what experiments can we run? Either with this work item, or maybe there's something else we could try alongside that really drive towards the overall success. And I have a fairly recent one in the last couple of years example where I saw this working really effectively. I work at the Iowa HHS, the Health and Human Services Agency. The director was preparing for the legislative session and determined that she would like to have a publicly facing data dashboard to show the legislators when she was presenting as part of her legislative session presentation. So she engaged a business lead, and I think there were about 5 months for her to get a first draft of this dashboard. The business lead worked with all the different divisions and business areas to gather different requirements about the dashboard reports that they wanted to put on the website. And they did that for about 4 months, and that's when they came to me and said, hey, we've got this list of 35 to 40 requirements for a dashboard, and we need it all delivered in a month. I was like, okay. And I asked them these questions. So, what's the purpose? Who's the audience? Who are the people that are going to be looking at this? What are they going to get out of it? What are some of the success criteria? How do we know we've done a good job when this is done? And the answer was basically, don't know. So we took the next 2 weeks, and there was agreement that we did need to know those answers, so that was good. We went and worked with the executive team, and in the next 2 weeks we identified what the vision and success criteria were for the effort, and it was pretty straightforward. The vision was we wanted to provide accurate data to citizens to build confidence and understanding of the services provided by the agency. And the success criteria were, one, they had to be clear and understandable, even for someone without detailed understanding of the agency and what they do. Had to be easy to find, and had to be consistent. Couldn't be possible to go look at those dashboards that possibly contradicted other information that was out on the web or other dashboards. So with that success criteria and vision, we pulled up the list of requirements again and realized we could probably do that whole list and not have achieved any of the things that the team wanted, that the executive team said was important. So we pulled in a team and gave them that vision and success criteria and said, what do we want to do? Kicked off 1 week, and within the next week, the team delivered a fully functional dashboard with data domain that no one had worked in before, with tools that hadn't been, and technology that hadn't been used previously, and coordinating across vendors and PR departments in a state government organization that met the success criteria and was well on the way of achieving that vision. Presented it to the director. Everyone was super happy and agreed that we could keep working forward on picking off some of the other requirements that did align with the vision from that list. And we hadn't done a single thing they asked us to do. So, and I get that example may be extreme and is not something that's going to be a common situation that's available to people, but the notion is the same, is always understand how that connection is made between the vision and what you're doing, and always strive to do your work in line with that vision. All right, the next suggestion here is to create a protective shield, and this is really hard to see, but what you're looking at here is that scene in Harry Potter where McGonagall and all the other professors are creating that magical dome over Hogwarts to keep out Voldemort and like the army of giants and goblins and everything. So yeah, do that. Be McGonagall is suggestion number 2 here, and figure out a way to protect a group of people that are doing that agile execution and striving towards that vision. Basically, finding within that pyramid hierarchical structure some space that you have some influence, building trusted relationships, experimenting and trying things, dampening your failures, amplifying your successes, demonstrating undeniable success, and using that to make your shield bigger and get a bigger group of people that are executing in this way. And the example I just went through is also a decent example that covers this area as well, specifically around build trusted relationships. My nature is just get stuff done and no chit chat, no talking, let's go do some work and finish what's in front of us. And in this particular case, when that business lead came to me, the two of us decided to meet for a few hours and go through what we needed to do for the effort. And we consciously took a good hour and a half to 2 hours at the front of that, just getting to know each other. We hadn't met before. We talked about where we'd been in the organization, talked about our kids, talked about our families, talked about what we like to do, build that relationship. And it's one of the first times that I've really consciously tried to do that, and the result is really speaks for itself. I can only imagine, thinking back, what would have happened if I had walked to her and said, your 35 requirements are garbage and we need to do something else, without having built a strong foundation to have a good conversation about the work. So building trusted relationships is very, very effective. Third suggestion I have is creating constellations. Within those pyramids that have often silos of skill-based people that prevent collaboration and communication, there are almost always shining stars that you'll be able to find that exist in that structure. So this suggestion is really to figure out a way to create connectivity between those shining stars in those different silos. There are a lot of ways you can do this. Often volunteer type activities are a useful way to find them. Say that you're starting a book club, say that you listen to a podcast and you want to discuss it with people, maybe have a lunch and learn for talking through a concept that people are working through at work, possibly finding a problem that's out there that doesn't fit neatly within one of those pyramid silos and gather some people together to solve it. The people that get engaged and participate and get excited about doing some of those things will often be your constellation stars that you can form, and will be your allies and your advocates as you continue to build that shield. Align on values and principles. So again, this is another common one. I think in the Agile space, we're all familiar with values and principles. I often find that folks that I encounter who have been swimming in the toxicity of a bureaucratic culture for long periods of time will often have a very different opinion on how to do work than someone coming to the table with an agile mindset. And so, but however, those people are often completely aligned when you bring the conversation back to the principles that are important, the values that you share. So this suggestion is really just a matter of suggesting to do that up front with people when possible. So taking an example like one of our favorite agile values of people and interactions over processes and tools, it's likely that most people are going to agree people and interactions are more important than processes and tools. And if you establish that, you've talked about it ahead of time, it's when that person then turns around and says, hey, I've got this problem, I bought this tool, we're going to solve it, you can go back to that conversation that you've had previously and ask some questions specific to the principles and values that you share. And my last and probably most effective suggestion I have is willing an organization to change is often something that's very challenging to do and best done by changing yourself. And I have an example of this as well. I talk to a professional coach every once in a while, and in one of these sessions that I was talking to my coach about a really challenging situation I was having at work with folks on my team who weren't really aligning with some of the things that I was hoping to move us forward on. And I was expressing how how just, they weren't listening and they weren't, agreeing to the things I wanted to do. And he gave me some of the best advice I've gotten, which was, shut the F up and listen. And I was like, but I am listening. They're telling me stuff, and I'm repackaging it and telling it back to them and showing them where they're wrong. And he's like, nope, shut the F up and listen. Until you can describe from their shoes how they feel, the things that are important to them, what motivates them, what they're aspiring to do, how that impacts the work that you're trying to do, you shouldn't say anything. So I said, fine, I'll try it. And I sat down with one of the people I was working with. Who actually said, let's go grab a beer. And we sat down, and I was like, Kevin, silent, you talk. Tell me everything. All the things I just said. What motivates you? How does that align with the work? How do you feel? All the things. What do you think we should be doing next? What are your fears? What are your concerns? And the craziest thing happened is that person started talking through their stuff and basically ended up convincing themselves of every single thing that I'd been trying to talk to them about for the last 3 months and agreeing to it. And I hadn't said anything. And I was like, so I'm just sad that I haven't learned this Jedi mind trick earlier in my career, and that I'm still terrible at it. But I learned this lesson every single day, that if there's something that I want to change, the best place to start is right here. All right, so that was all the things I had in the presentation. I don't know how we're doing on time. I guess getting close. So next steps wise, as I mentioned, I'll be throwing a topic in the open space. Maybe there's a work breakdown conversation we can have. We can figure out how to solve global warming, or maybe student debt or something. What's our first slice of that sucker? Or just continue to talk about and discuss work breakdown in general, or any of these topics. And I guess we've got a little extra time if there's additional questions, comments, thoughts. Yeah, well, you and you.
I'm a little interested in how they got in your project example, how they got through 4 months of doing stuff, and then ending up having to throw it away. So I don't know if you can circle back.
Oh, the requirements? Well, that's pretty common. So people are used to that. And I don't know what you're asking, how they receive the.
Yeah, the disconnect, I guess, because, and maybe that is the difference, is that in that organization, maybe
It's commonplace.
4 months, nobody checks what they're doing and stuff like that.
Well, and yeah, I mean, there's so many things, right? It's hard to even express the level of how much that goes on, and how it's been commonplace. But yeah, the work did end up being used. It's just we layered it out and leveraged it as we went forward. So it's not like it was like we really threw it away. It's just it wasn't necessary to start.
Or they rely on the process too much.
Which one? Sorry.
Like, I have to do this requirement, I have to do this, I have to do this. So the process rather than circling back.
Yeah, that's the common mindset. Is first thing we need to do is write down a bunch of requirements or solution things, right? So a very common situation I find myself in is there'll be a problem that people have, and they'll say like, here, we're going to buy a system to solve whatever this problem is, and they actually can't articulate the problem or the success criteria for what they're trying to achieve, and that often results in, well, the next logical step is we go create requirements for that system, and we'll do that work, right? And we still haven't articulated the why around it. I don't know if I'm helping. Am I helping? Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about how and throw money at problems in areas that is hardware and cloud and stuff like that. Besides, how do we break down barriers to people getting more qualified talent in the door? People have a process, the obligations that they're happy, that doesn't necessarily tell people
I don't know if anybody, is everybody hearing that question? Just how to incentivize people to want to become part of some of these organizations? Whew. That's a tough one, and I think maybe the Shield example might be one place that I would suggest as a starting point for that is, if there are places where we can build out sheltered areas of excellence that are really successful and mission-driven and are demonstrating undeniable success and present that as a motivational thing to bring people in. Talk about that vision, that mission. I think people are, in general, mission-based and want to do something that's good, right? And they want to do something that's productive. And one of the barriers, in addition to the money for people wanting to come into government, is they feel like they can't achieve that. And that the opportunity is not available. So showing that that opportunity is there in some small way could be one possible method of getting people in the door. Other questions? Yeah?
I think you have an interesting problem that I don't think all of us also understand. It's similar to the employees, and you brought up the food stamp example, and there's a stigma associated with that. And how do you get an individual motivated to work on that and maybe not think that that is right in that person?
Ooh, so conflict of ideology and people doing work? That's a tough one.
How do you solve that? You have to have people on your team that maybe don't believe in the vision.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a core thing that's necessary for someone to be productive and effective. So, I mean, you really got two choices there. Either they're not going to be productive and effective, or, you got to find somewhere that they are aligned and find something that they do believe in that you can have them working on. So I don't think there's a good answer for it. I fundamentally don't believe in this work, and I want to improve their ability to do it. Yeah?
I work in Illinois about for and usually there's enough good stories going around somewhere. You can find some synergy somewhere. There's always enough angle to it that there's very few people who are totally, I can't work on it.
Yeah, find a way to make that appeal to those folks.
It's not black and white, it's all working in areas.
Yeah, a lot of complexity. Someone else? Well, we're getting close on time, so, and feel free to find me if you have something you have to offer for, or there's this conversation going on that I'm not aware of or participating in and want to point me to it. Would love to hear it. Thank you, everybody.